There is a decision waiting for nearly every American, and most people make it in a single afternoon. They sit down, they fill out a form, they choose a date, and they move on with their lives. It takes maybe 20 minutes, and that 20-minute decision, made on a quiet afternoon, will quietly shape the size of their income for the rest of their lives. And it can mean the difference of more than $100,000. It is the decision of when to claim Social Security, and it is one of the very few decisions on this entire channel that, once made, you can almost never take back. I want to tell you about two brothers. We'll call them Tom and Dave, because those are not their real names, but I promise you, the story is real, and the gap between what happened to each of them still stops me cold when I think about it. Tom and Dave were close in age. They earned almost exactly the same money over their careers. They were entitled to almost exactly the same Social Security benefit. And yet, because of one decision each of them made in an afternoon, one of them will collect tens of thousands of dollars more than the other over the course of his retirement. Same career, same earnings, same benefit on paper, wildly different outcomes. The only thing that separated them was the date each one wrote on a form. By the end of this, you will understand exactly how the timing of this one decision works, why the choice that feels safest is so often the most expensive, the handful of situations where claiming early actually is the right move, and how to think about this decision the way the most careful retirees I ever knew thought about it. Because this is not really a decision about money. It is a decision about time, about marriage, about risk, and about how long you believe you are going to live. And almost nobody is told that. Now, before we go any further, I have to be honest with you about something, the same way I always am. I cannot tell you the single right age for you to claim. Anyone who gives you one number without knowing your health, your marriage, your savings, and your fears is not helping you. They are guessing. What I can give you is the framework, the way to actually think this through. And once you understand it, the fog clears, and the right answer for your situation usually steps forward on its own. So let's start with the machinery, because you cannot make a good decision about a thing you do not understand. Social Security gives you a window. For most people, you can begin claiming as early as 62, or you can wait all the way up into your late 60s. And here is the part that matters more than anything else I will say today. The longer you wait, the larger your monthly check becomes, permanently, for the rest of your life. This is not a small difference. Claiming at the earliest possible age versus waiting until the latest can change the size of your monthly benefit dramatically. The person who waits can receive a substantially larger check every single month for as long as they live. The government is, in effect, offering you a deal. Wait, and we will pay you more. And it turns out to be one of the few genuinely good deals left in the financial world, and most people turn it down without ever realizing what they are turning down. So why does almost everyone claim early? Why did so many people, for so many years, take the smaller check the moment it became available? And here is where we have to talk honestly about human nature, because the reasons are deeply human, and I do not judge a single one of them. The first reason is fear. There is a voice in the back of the mind that says, "Take the money while you can. Who knows what tomorrow brings? Who knows if it will even be there?" It is a powerful voice, and it has been whispering to people for generations. The second reason is a simple, understandable hunger. People retire, the paychecks stop, and there is money sitting right there, available, and it is very hard to look at available money and choose to wait. And the third reason, the quiet one nobody admits, is a kind of gamble against their own life. A feeling of, I might not live long enough for waiting to pay off, so I had better grab it now. Let me say something directly to you here. Because this is the heart of it. If you have been planning to claim early, or if you already have, I am not here to tell you that you are foolish. These instincts are ancient and they are human, but I want you to at least make this decision with your eyes fully open, understanding what you are trading away, rather than letting fear make the choice for you in an afternoon. That is the entire reason this channel exists, to pull these decisions out of the fog and into the daylight, before they are made, while you can still choose. So subscribe and stay with me, because what I am about to explain is the part that changes how people see this entire decision. Here is the concept that unlocks everything, and almost no one is taught it. It is called the break-even point. Think about it this way. If you claim early, you start collecting checks sooner, but each check is smaller. If you wait, you start collecting later, but each check is much larger. So in the early years, the person who claimed early is ahead. They have money in hand, while the patient one is still waiting with nothing. But every month that passes, the patient one, with their bigger check, is closing the gap. And at some point, years down the line, the two of them break even. After that point, the one who waited pulls ahead, and then keeps pulling further and further ahead, for the rest of their life. So the entire question, stripped down to its bones, becomes this: do you expect to live past the break-even point? If you live a long life, waiting wins, and it can win enormously. If you do not, claiming early wins. That is the real gamble underneath this whole decision. It is not really about money at all. It is a quiet bet on your own longevity, and that is why your health and your family history matter just as much as the math. Let me make this real, because the word break-even sounds clinical, and there is nothing clinical about it. Picture someone who claims early and starts receiving their smaller check right away. For the first several years, they feel clever. They have money coming in while their patient friend has chosen to wait and is receiving nothing. They might even feel a little sorry for the friend, or quietly superior. But somewhere in the late 70s or early 80s, depending on the numbers, the lines cross. The patient friend, who has been receiving a much larger check, catches up, and from that moment on, pulls ahead. And here is the thing people forget. Most of us, especially if we have already made it to retirement in reasonable health, have a very real chance of living well into our 80s or beyond, which means that for a great many people, the break-even point is not some distant, unlikely milestone. It is a birthday they are quite likely to see, and then to live well past, collecting that larger check the whole way. The person who claimed early to feel safe spends their final, longest years with the smaller income. That is the part the fear never mentions. And I want you to notice something about that fear, because it plays a trick on us. The fear says, claim early, because you might not live long enough for waiting to pay off. But think about what that fear is actually protecting you from. It is protecting you from the scenario where you die early, in which case, frankly, the money mattered least to you. And it is exposing you to the opposite scenario, where you live a long life, which is the scenario where running short of money would hurt the most. The fear has it exactly backwards. It guards against the outcome that hurts least and surrenders to the one that hurts most. Now I want to talk about the single biggest mistake I ever watched people make with this decision, because it is the one that costs the most, and it is the one almost nobody sees coming. It has to do with marriage, and it is the difference between Tom and Dave that I promised you at the beginning. When you are married, your Social Security decision is not just about you, it is about the two of you, and crucially, it is about whichever one of you lives longer. Because here is what happens, and so few couples understand it until it is too late. When one spouse passes away, The surviving spouse generally gets to keep the larger of the two benefits, but not both. The smaller one goes away. So the size of the higher earner's check does not just determine that person's income, it determines the income of whichever spouse is left behind, possibly for many years, possibly when they are at their most vulnerable and alone. This is the part that stops me cold. Tom, the older brother, was the higher earner in his marriage, and he claimed early, out of that very human fear, locking in a smaller check. Dave, the higher earner in his marriage, understood the survivor math, and he waited, locking in the largest possible check. Years from now, when each of them is gone, Tom's widow will be left with a permanently smaller income, and Dave's widow will be left with a permanently larger one for the rest of her life. Same earnings, same career. The decision Tom made in an afternoon, out of fear, did not just affect him. It reached forward in time and shaped the security of the person he loved most, long after he was gone. That is the weight of this decision, and almost no one feels it at the time. Let me sit on this a moment longer, because it is the most important thing in this entire file, and it is the thing people understand the least. We tend to think of the Social Security decision as a personal one. My benefit, my check, my choice. But for a married couple, the higher earner's check is really a form of insurance on the longer life of the two of you. Think about who tends to be left behind. Very often it is the wife, and very often she lives years, sometimes a decade or more, beyond her husband. Those years, when she is alone, are precisely the years when financial security matters most and is hardest to rebuild. And the size of the income she lives on in those years was decided, quietly, by a choice her husband made decades earlier, perhaps without ever telling her, perhaps without ever understanding what he was deciding on her behalf. I have seen the other side of this too, and it is hard to watch. A widow, years after losing her husband, discovering that the income she now lives on is smaller than it had to be, because a decision was made long ago in an afternoon, by a man who loved her and simply did not know what he was choosing. He was not careless with money. He was careful with money. He just did not know that this particular form, filled out on this particular afternoon, was the most important thing he would ever do for her after he was gone. Nobody told him. And that, more than any tax bracket or any market, is why I make these files. So let me give you the framework the careful ones actually used, because by now you can probably feel it taking shape on its own. For the higher earner in a marriage, there is a very strong case for waiting, for delaying that benefit as long as possible, because that check is going to protect two lives, not one, and it will protect the survivor for as long as they live. This is the single most overlooked move in the entire Social Security decision, and getting it right is worth more than almost anything else a married couple can do. For a single person in good health, with a family history of long life, waiting also tends to win, because the odds favor living past that break-even point, into the years where the larger check pays off again and again. And then there are the cases where claiming early, genuinely, is the right answer, and I would be lying to you if I did not say so plainly. If you are in poor health, and you have honest reason to believe you will not live long past the break-even point, claiming early can be the right and rational choice. If you have no other income at all and you simply need the money to live and keep a roof over your head, then the decision is made for you by necessity, and there is no shame in that whatsoever. And if you are the lower earner in a marriage, the strategy is often different from the higher earner, and the two of you should be coordinating, not deciding separately. The point is not that waiting is always right. The point is that the decision deserves real thought, not a gut reaction on an afternoon. I want to pause here, because I know this is a lot, And I know some of you are doing painful arithmetic in your heads right now. Maybe you already claimed early. Maybe your spouse did, and you are wondering if a door has closed. If that is you, I want you to hear me clearly. The purpose of understanding this is not to torture yourself over a past choice. It is to make every remaining decision, yours and your family's, with full sight. There are still moves available to most people, and there are still ways to strengthen a survivor's position even now. So do not sit in regret, sit in resolve. And if these are the things you wish someone had walked you through before that afternoon, then subscribe, and let me keep walking you through the ones still ahead of you. Now let me deal with the fear directly, the one that makes so many people claim early, the fear that Social Security will not be there, so you had better grab what you can while you can. I understand that fear, and I will not wave it away or tell you it is silly, because it lives in a great many people. But I will ask you to think about it clearly rather than emotionally. Making a permanent, lifelong decision that shrinks your income and your spouse's survivor income based on a fear about the distant future is letting that fear cost you real money today and every day for the rest of your life. Whatever happens to the system over the long run, shrinking your own benefit out of worry is a strange way to protect yourself from uncertainty. Fear is a terrible financial advisor. It always has been. There is one more piece I have to mention, because it trips people up constantly, and it connects directly to the last file we did together. If you claim Social Security early and you are still working, earning a paycheck, the system can temporarily hold back part of your benefit because of your earnings. People do not expect this, and it catches them off guard. And separately, remember what we covered before. Your other income in retirement, those withdrawals from your big tax-deferred account, can cause more of your Social Security to be taxed. So the timing of when you claim and the timing of how you pull from your other accounts are not two separate decisions. They are one decision, braided together, and the careful retiree thinks about them as a single picture, not as two unrelated forms filled out in two different afternoons. And this braiding actually points to a strategy, the careful ones used, one that solves the most common objection to waiting. Because when I tell people the higher earner should consider delaying, the first thing they say is, "But how am I supposed to live in those years if I am not taking Social Security yet?" It is a fair question, and the answer is elegant once you see it. Those early retirement years, the ones before you claim, are exactly the low-income window we talked about in the last file. The careful retiree bridges those years by drawing from their own savings and their tax-deferred account, deliberately, at a low tax rate, while delaying Social Security so the check keeps growing. In other words, the two strategies are not in conflict. They fit together like two halves of the same plan. You spend down the right accounts in the right years, and that very act is what buys you the freedom to delay the benefit that protects you and your spouse for life. Most people never see that these two decisions are actually one. The ones who do tend to retire with a calm that the others never quite find. So let's bring Tom and Dave back one last time, because their story carries the whole lesson. Two brothers, the same earnings, the same benefit on paper. One let fear choose for him in an afternoon and locked in a smaller check that will follow his widow for the rest of her life. The other understood the machinery, understood the survivor math, looked past the fear, and waited, locking in the largest possible protection for the person he would one day leave behind. Neither of them was ruined, but one of them quietly gave away a sum of money large enough to change a life, and he never even felt it leave, because it left in the form of a check that was simply smaller than it could have been, month after month, year after year, forever. So let's bring it all together. Social Security gives you a window, and the longer you wait, the larger your check becomes, permanently. The whole decision turns on a quiet bet about how long you will live, measured against the break-even point. For the higher earner in a marriage, waiting often protects not one life, but two, reaching forward to shelter the survivor long after you are gone. Claiming early has its honest place, in poor health, in true need, but far too often, it is not need that drives the choice, it is fear. And fear is the most expensive advisor you will ever hire. And the timing of this decision is braided together with how you draw down the rest of your money. A single picture, not two separate forms. It is, above all, a decision. One of the few on this whole channel that you truly cannot take back. And it deserves far more than an afternoon. Before you go, tell me something in the comments. When you claimed, or when you plan to claim, was anyone ever in the room with you explaining the survivor math, the part about protecting the spouse who lives longer? Be honest. Because in all my years, I found that almost no one was. And that single gap has cost more families, more money, than nearly anything else I ever saw. And if you want the rest of these, the decisions that define your retirement, and the ones you can't undo, then subscribe and stay with me. There is a new file every week. The next one steps into something quieter and even more personal. What happens to a couple's income when one spouse passes away? And the trap, the so-called widow's tax, that can quietly raise a grieving person's tax bill at the worst possible moment of their life. It is a decision you make long before the day arrives, and almost no one makes it in time. Take your time with these. They are the decisions of a lifetime, and a lifetime of work has earned them your patience.